All right, everybody, welcome back. So, this is our final session of our 2021 HACR Leadership Pipeline Program. And we hope that you've had a great 2-day virtual experience with us. And looking forward to this session that I'll be personally moderating, and that is growing your career through board service. Now, earlier today, we did have a session talking about boards, talking about corporate boards, but this session is going to be different. This is actually be a bit of a more of a strategic session about how you can leverage board service, not only as a way to help you rise up the corporate ladder and to have that positive impact on your company, but also how it can support you in many other ways in terms of growing your network, learning the important things that your company is doing in terms of its external strategies, how you can align yourself to your company's community strategies through board service, and many of the things that we'll do. So we'll talk a lot about these topics about growing your career through board service. I do want to take this time to thank the session sponsors, Toyota and Lowe's. And so I do want to first take this time to thank Toyota for your support. And please see the video by our session sponsor, Toyota.
We are the strong, the tenacious and compassionate members of diverse communities. We don't let others define us. We remember our roots, while bravely writing the script for our own future. We have an undeniable zest for life and a heart that beats with resounding determination. Whether it's supporting our Toyota team members, embracing the richness of their cultural diversity, or partnering with them to drive business decisions, or serving the community, collaborating with grassroots and national organizations. Together, we're improving access to opportunities where members of every generation can thrive. We celebrate you. When we come together, we can create limitless possibilities for all. Vayamos juntos.
Great. Thank you so much, Toyota, for your support of us and for supporting this session. I also want to just take this time to recognize Lowe's. Lowe's is also a company that's a member of HACR and has partnered with us on this movement to improve the pipeline of Latinos rising up the corporate ladder. Again, we're very thankful to Lowe's for your support, your sponsorship, and your commitment to Hispanic inclusion and the work that you do every day. So again, a big thank you to Lowe's. All right, so let's get started. So I want to introduce our very, very esteemed panel. I'm really excited about these three individuals because I have immense respect for each one of them, not only because of what they do in their companies, but how they leverage their leadership at their companies to make a difference on external boards, but then how they're able to leverage those board services to really illuminate internally what they're doing at their companies. And so I'm really excited for our three panels. So I want to introduce first Jackie Puente. She is the Executive Director for External Affairs for Comcast NBC Universal. Please welcome Jackie to our virtual stage. Hello, Jackie. And secondly, I want to introduce Carlos Becerra. He's the Group Manager for Enterprise Transformation for Toyota North America, our session sponsor. Please welcome Carlos to our virtual stage. Thank you, Carlos. And then lastly, introduce Julio Suarez. He's a senior director for community affairs for Anheuser-Busch, and also someone that serves on some very prominent boards as well. So please welcome Julio to our virtual stage as well. There we go. All right, so let's get started. So I want each one of you, I know in this session will come out and share some of the many boards that you serve on, and the connection between those boards and what you do at each of the companies. But I want to first start with maybe a very simplistic answer, but one that I think is a good way to start the conversation. So, can you share how serving on nonprofit boards has actually helped you to rise up and support the work that you're doing at each of your companies, and why is it important for you to serve on nonprofits as it relates to the work that you do at your companies? So let's start with. I want to go with Jackie because you're on the upper right hand sides, and then we'll go clockwise.
Absolutely, Sid. So I am just really, first of all, thank you for putting this together, and for HACR, for the entire board of directors, and for the staff. This is a really tremendous opportunity, even though we're not together in person, to talk about some really important issues as people are charting out their careers, and as we're charting out the future of corporate America, really as the workers and consumers here. I'm super fortunate in my role. I'm the executive director for external affairs at Comcast, NBC Universal, and my work, much of it is, talking to and listening to, I think more importantly, the different communities where our employees live and work. And so I was fortunate. I joined the company about 10 years ago to have opportunities to join boards, really to get to know these organizations that we work with every day, and to really understand them better, to understand the clients in the nonprofit world that they serve, to understand, their stakeholders, and to understand the work that's being done at the grassroots and also at the national level, whether it's an organization that's serving a state, local, or federal, national community. So, I've been honored over the years to be on the board of many HACR member organizations. I currently serve on the board of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce with Carlos on this panel. I also serve on the board of the U.S. Hispanic Leadership Institute. And both of those have been great opportunities to really dig in and learn what Hispanic business is and what community grassroots leaders are talking about and thinking about, and how I can bring that back into our corporate strategy at Comcast.
Great, thank you so much. So let's go with Carlos.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, I am so glad to be part of this panel. It's a privilege to be here. But, my experience has been very unique because I grew up in a corporation, right? And consequently, at the beginning, you're trying to go out and basically define the path within the organization. And it gets to a point in which you start to get involved. And there's so many learnings that come out of that endeavor, that journey. It's distinguishing how a for-profit organization operates versus a nonprofit organization. There's a different culture. There's a different dynamic. There's a different way of interaction. The machinery in which you basically mobilize and influence change is completely different. And it's important for you to go and adjust your own leadership style to the needs of the board. But secondarily, it's a great opportunity for you to be out of your comfort zone. Once you're doing a job and you basically get comfortable, or at least know the boundaries in which you're operating, it's easier to navigate. But once you transition as a board member, you have to recognize that you need to learn, you need to adjust, you need to adapt, you need to get involved, and you need to start bringing the skill set that you develop, in your professional career to the board. And that creates a different opportunity, a very unique opportunity, and tremendous amount of growth. So I think that is probably what it brings to you. And it's a fantastic path for you to expand your capabilities as you move up in your career.
Great, thank you, Carlos. Julio, what's been tell me why is this important for you, and how has it benefited your career and Anheuser Busch?
So, thank you for the opportunity. Glad to be here. I think it's been a couple of tangible examples. So, number one, I reside in St. Louis, Missouri, which I am not a native of St. Louis. I moved here for the role. And by joining some nonprofit boards here, like the Urban League, for instance, or joining another one that's called Focus St. Louis, which runs all the leadership development programs in St. Louis, it allowed me to actually, if you will, expand my network. It allowed me to integrate into the city. It also allowed me to, at least one of those organizations is a very close partner and longstanding partner of the company. So it allowed me to serve as the voice, the representative of the company, in the eyes of a very important stakeholder and all the other individuals that serve on the board. Beyond that, I can tell you that I wouldn't be at Anheuser-Busch if it hadn't been for my nonprofit board service. I actually got referred to an opening that was here by my board service by my service on the CHCI corporate advisory panel. So somebody who worked for Anheuser-Busch at the time, we met through that, and that opening became available, and he thought of me and referred me for the role. That would not have happened had I not even served on that role. I probably wouldn't even have heard about the opportunity and would not have taken the time to apply. So that's a very tangible example. So anyway, I think that they're very much complementary to not only for your expanding your network, but also for developing skills that perhaps are not natural for you in your current roles at work. You may be able to develop new skills or sharpen some skills that you need to work on.
That's great, and I do want to build a little bit on what you shared, Julio, because a lot of our attendees are in roles where they may have to consider taking assignments in different cities, or they may have to look at ways in which they can align what they're doing internally with what the companies are doing externally in these roles. My first so my question is that can you talk about how strategies that our attendees can think about if they wanted to align their board service with what their companies are doing already, so that way it not only has that alignment, it'll address one other topic that I want to get to, which is give get. And I'll start with Carlos.
Say that every organization has a pulse on the community in which they're basically physically located, and a path for involvement, whether it's community outreach, whether it is basically the partnership with the local chamber of commerce, just by the sheer number of the number of employees that you may have, you have some local responsibilities as an organization. And from a diversity and inclusion, there is also another segment that matters. And probably the best opportunity that we have is to learn about what are some of the priorities, is to learn about what is the mission, what is the vision, what are the guiding principles that are informing the organizational involvement in the community. And that will help us understand how what we do could fit with the different organizations that exist around us, right? So in my particular case, I was able to recognize that one of our missions was youth at risk. And consequently, as part of our community outreach, it was easier to look for organizations that basically met those objectives and had visions and missions that align beautifully with the corporate mission and vision. And consequently, the tie was there, the opportunity for us to align and to create partnerships organically unfolds. So it's an element of due diligence and homework. The more that we understand how our organization is positioning itself in the community and what are some of the organizational priorities that is informing the determinations that we're making on a day-to-day basis, the easier it is for us to understand the engagements that we have formed throughout the years, and the easier it is for us to understand how we can play a role in serving in some of those boards. Based on our passion and our commitment and some of the activities that we may be doing, after work, there's always an opportunity for alignment, but we need to connect the dots. So we need to understand how the organization is structuring that component, what is our individual calling and passion, and how the role that we play for the organization could help us serve and connect the dots between the three different components that I just highlighted.
Great, thanks, Carl. That's great feedback. Julio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Carlos's points were right on point. I think that generally, if let's say you're brand new to an organization, most companies these days are publicizing some of the work that they're doing, not only in terms of the product or service that they deliver, but also how they're interacting, contributing to society at large, right? So that can serve as a guide for you as to what is important, so that you don't join a board. I mean, you're welcome to join any nonprofit board. I think it's a great experience regardless. But if you're trying to be strategic as to which nonprofit board you want to join, then let's make sure that nonprofit board, that a nonprofit organization is doing work that is critical enough that the company is highlighting it on its website, on its press releases, on its social media. So that may be a good way because I get approached oftentimes for people, yeah, I want to get involved in the community. I was thinking about such and such organization, and it's perfectly fine. But if you're trying to use that as a stepping stone or as a way to interact with leaders of the organization, if you're trying to make sure that you're aligned with something that is a priority for the business, then you got to do a little bit more homework.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Julio. This is great, and so and Jackie, what are your thoughts as well? And given not only given what you're doing on some boards, but you're serving on a lot of advisory boards as well, and how you're thinking about this in terms of your alignment with the work that Comcast NBC Universal does.
Yeah, I would just add on, and I think the idea of connecting the dots is really powerful here. But I think of the companies that participate with HACR, right? And these are companies where the employees are already engaged in their employee resource groups, right? People are already seeking out mentors and leaders in their companies where they want to build those relationships. And I think oftentimes, community service and board service is a great way, not just to help, take on another responsibility and show where you can be a good brand ambassador, or you can be a good spokesperson in your community, but also it's a great way to build relationships within your organization, right? I think so many companies now are stepping up and making big announcements, big dollar numbers that go out to nonprofit organizations. And those dollars are wonderful, even better spent when there is somebody that's taking an interest in making sure that those dollars are spent responsibly, right? And I think, if you are somebody who cares about the programs that your company is engaged in, another great way of making sure that those marketing campaigns, those philanthropic dollars go the extra distance is to get involved directly with the organization. And I think, we work in a large company where we're doing many things across many different sectors, and finding employees, finding, people on our teams that want to step up and take responsibility, attend the events, participate in the board meetings, provide us the feedback, what's working and what's not working. It goes a long way developing those internal and external relationships.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And I think you hit on a couple of things that companies do seek out employees that are willing to serve on these nonprofit boards. So it's good for the audience to know that, because I think even building, I think what both Carlos and Julio said is that, I mean, of course, anyone's always welcome to join any nonprofit board, and you want to join a board that meets your passion. But if you're trying to think about this in terms of how does it illuminate you internally inside your company, you may want to be more strategic about how you choose your boards, and also how do you connect with how do you again, as I think as Carlos said, just connect the dots together. So I want to go, and I'll start with you, Julio, since I'm going rotating. Is that when one of the things that often is I want to say misunderstood, but sometimes doesn't but there's some misunderstanding, is boards often have give gets when serving on these boards. And sometimes what happens is that if you're joining a board where there's not that alignment with your company, you've got to figure out how to make the give get work, unless you got foundation support and so forth. But sometimes when you're being strategic and looking for these nonprofit boards where there is alignment with your company, it's a way for you to be able to help make those give get goals, given some of these very, very prominent nonprofits. And I'm not just referring to just some of the Latino nonprofits. I mean, the nonprofits where there might be, the United Way, American Heart Association, you're on the Urban League Board of Directors, for example, in St. Louis, and other kinds of boards, but even how they align with their company. So tell me how you think about that give get strategy, and how you use it to align, to do that, to align not only with your internal goals, but also that external goal, supporting that nonprofit.
That is a terrific question. So I can tell you, for example, that the three of us work for fairly large companies with fairly well recognized brands, particularly in the markets where we're based, right? And it is oftentimes that nonprofits will see any employee of that organization, as a way into the company, right? I get it. It's strategic of them, but not everybody has access to the influence on budgetary decisions. Now, when I came here to the company back in 2017, I actually launched a program. We call it Tap Into Giving, which is our workplace giving and volunteering program. And through this program, employees, any of our 19,000 employees in the U.S. can make a donation to any nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, as long as it's registered, and have that donation matched dollar for dollar by the Anheuser-Busch Foundation. That is pretty generous, right? And so if you're finding yourself in a situation where you are expected to make a gift, that may be a vehicle. And many of our companies probably have this. I suspect that Comcast and Toyota have this type of program. Yeah, that's a way for you to meet your quote unquote board obligations from a give and get policy. Beyond that, I would just advise for you to just walk into these type of situations, into these board opportunities with open eyes, and just make sure that you ask those questions up front, because you don't want to be caught 6 months, 3 months into the board service, and then they're asking you to pitch in X dollar amount that perhaps is above your budget. I would argue that you should not be joining a nonprofit board that you're not willing to make a gift for yourself, right? So hopefully it's not only something that's strategic with the organization, but that you also share some level of passion, respect, admiration for the work that they're doing, and that you believe enough in it that you're willing to make a personal contribution as well.
Thanks, Julio. And Jackie, well, I know that you're on a lot of boards yourself. I kind of want to see if you can help answer this also from the Comcast NBC Universal side, how other employees, when they're looking at considering and aligning themselves on boards, and how Comcast has actually helped them meet their give gets, because Because again, while the session is not about nonprofit 101, one thing that everyone should know on this that's listening to this is that if you join a nonprofit, I think as Julio mentioned, there is an expectation that you're bringing something to the table, and sometimes that can and that might hinder some people from joining one. But there may be ways internally that you can help align that. But can you talk talk about that as well, Jackie?
Yeah, and I would start by saying that joining a nonprofit board is a very serious commitment, right? And so it's not something that people should decide to do lightly, or you wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to go be on this board locally or this national board, right? I think that oftentimes, joining a board is the result of building a relationship over time. Right? You attend events, you get to meet the other board members, you get to hear from them about what is happening at the board level, right? And I think that sometimes, you have to learn a little bit more about what the board is looking for in board members before you make that step to join the board. And, we talk about give get, and I think there's a question in the chat about what is give get. That may be a financial commitment to sit on the board. So let's say it's a local organization and they say you either give $1,000 or you raise $1,000 for the organization, sort of to pay for your seat on the board. And, that is a relatively, low dollar amount. It can be a lot more. And some nonprofits, especially national nonprofits, have a considerably higher number. And they look for corporate board members because they think that corporate board members will bring corporate budgets with them to sit on that board. But that is to say, I think, Julio makes a really great point that when you join this board, you need to have a personal, passion, commitment for what is happening. You should be prepared to make a personal contribution. And then I think it's a part of that conversation. How can you bring your tools, talents, treasures, right, to that? And boards have lots of different needs from board members, right? I'm a communications, government affairs person, right? And so the first boards that I sat on, I would sit on the government affairs committee, or I would sit on the communications, committee and work on helping them develop strategic plans for their communications or for their government affairs work. And I think, when boards are determining who will be on the board, in succession planning, there's traditionally a matrix of different skills, right? Different things that the organization needs to be successful. And if you're not coming to the table with, a large dollar amount or a corporate budget, you may still be able to bring other things that are very valuable to the organization. It could be the project management experience you have working at a company. If you're with a media company, it could be helping them create a strategic media partnership. Because as much as dollars are important, and dollars are very, very important, there's also the in-kind giving of your time and your skill set that should be, valuable to a board if you're joining, right? That you're there to provide your insight, your leadership, your creativity. And in many cases, I think, both Carlos and Julio mentioned this, it's your experience in corporate America, right? It's your ability to manage complex problems, to navigate, large organizations, and bring that to a nonprofit that can benefit from that.
Great. Thank you for that wonderful insight, Jackie. And so great, Carlos. So tell me what your thoughts are on this in terms of why it's important and thinking about that obstacle that many employees may go through when they're trying to join a board. But as Jackie and Julio mentioned, when the attendees heard a session earlier about corporate boards where you get paid to serve on a board. This is not it. this is in nonprofits. You're not getting paid. There is that give get. So it's very different. But when you're doing it strategically, it can help position you. So tell me what your thoughts on that.
I'll approach this question from a different angle, which is, look, I joined Toyota. It took me 10, 15 years to be in a position of getting involved, right, and really participate in some of the board engagements. And quite frankly, at the beginning, at least within Toyota, there is a nomination process. You get selected. They basically appoint you, and they come to you to see if you're willing to go and basically be part and participate. And at the beginning, you're so eager and so excited because they're tapping you on the shoulder, because they're giving you the opportunity to get involved, because they're empowering you to go and make a difference, that you walk in, you don't even know what you're doing. You sit in the room, there's the board, ready to go and basically host a session, and you're learning as you go. And in many instances, 2, 3, 4 meetings go by, and that's when you learned that there's an expectation for you to be able to go and contribute. And believe me, for everybody who is a board member the first time, this is usually a wake-up call. Is not only what the expectations are, how do I organize myself, how do I contribute, how do I add value? And you don't have those answers in instances as you get engaged. The more that you participate in boards and the more that you get involved, the more that you understand that this is a partnership. It's a representation of your personal brand. It's a representation of the corporate brand or your small business, or if you're an entrepreneur, a representation of the organization that you're building. And consequently, it's super important to go and establish expectations from day one. Understand what is that is expected of you, and understand what is it that you expect from that particular organization. And I think that Jackie and Julio reference how there's multiple ways to be able to go and contribute: volunteers, subject matter expertise, project management, time, in-kind contributions, etc. And what matters is to be able to understand what those expectations are and whether that is going to be a good match for you as an individual, for you as an employee, and for the organization as a whole. You got to monitor that as you go through this journey. So the best probably lesson learned that I have acquired as I participate in many of this is just to be able to go and ask the questions up front. And if you get nominated or appointed, is for you to be able to go and sit down, participate in the onboarding process, ask the right questions, understand what is expected from you, and be able to gauge, how is it that you can contribute, and how is it that you can add value, and how can you deliver on the value that is expected from you.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. And that it's actually almost a perfect segue because you mentioned that you got tapped on the shoulder in some cases, and where Toyota said, "I want you to serve on this nonprofit board," and which kind of goes almost to the assumption of say it's almost an expectation of your company. That as part of your role and the work that you're doing, you should be doing some external things that align to the company's external community CSR strategies. And so I want to, and so my question is, and I want to go to Jackie and then I go to Julio, is that if you look at it from the perspective of the company, if you look at it from the corporate perspective, why would a company want you to serve on these boards when they're like, I need you to just, stay at work, do your job, stay at your desk, don't leave, only do lunch and come back into the office. Don't do any of this external board stuff. But we know that companies do want their employees to serve on nonprofit boards. So why would a company do that? I'll start with you, Jackie.
So thankfully, Comcast doesn't just have me sitting at my desk all day or any desk all day at this point. But I think that, there is value in having particularly executives, right, plugged in local markets and plugged in the stakeholders and consumer groups that they want to serve and super serve, right? And I serve with the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, on their national board, working with USHCC and other Hispanic advocacy organizations as well, right? I oftentimes sit in the national organization partnership, right? But I want to make sure that my peers and colleagues across our markets are also plugged in at the local level, right? In the different cities and states where they live and where they operate our business, because there's tremendous synergy, knowing what's happening from a national level, what the national dialogue is, particularly in the era that we're living in, where social justice and business are colliding every single day, but also, at the state and local level, where issues bubble up to the national level every single day. And having those relationships, being able to build friendships and trusted partnerships is incredibly valuable for our business. And I think also, we're living in a time more and more when employees and employee engagement, people want to know the businesses where they're working reflect their values. And this is a great way for companies to demonstrate that they are living their values every day. So, me serving on many of these boards, right, I am able to come back to Comcast headquarters or our offices in Washington, D.C., and provide my colleagues with opportunities to get engaged. And many of my colleagues that don't have the time to sit on the boards are able to benefit from these relationships as well. And it shows how we are living our values every day.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Julio, from your perspective, whether it's in Anheuser-Busch or whether it's just your observations, like, again, why would a company want to tell you, hey, I know you have your job to do. This is what you have to do. This is what what we expect you to do. But I like the idea of you serving on a non-for-profit board. So why would a company encourage their employees to serve on a nonprofit board?
So first of all, kudos to Jackie on serving on the AAPD board. I used to work with AAPD quite extensively in a previous life. So kudos to you for doing that. So I'll give you an example from Anheuser-Busch. We obviously sell beer. We know the things that drive our reputation as a business are high quality products. Believe it or not, the Budweiser Clydesdales. And the third piece is our emergency drinking water. We're not a commercial water company, but we have an emergency drinking water program. So we can water just for emergency purposes so we can respond to disasters, natural disasters when they occur, whether it's a hurricane, wildfire, tornado, etc. And we do that in partnership with the American Red Cross. And we've been doing that since 1988. This is a very long-standing partnership. It is a critical program to our corporate reputation. And so I've been asked to serve. I was asked about a year ago to serve on the American Red Cross Corporate Advisory Council, right? Well, it makes a lot of sense, right? It is one of our most important partners. It is a critical program for the business. So even though it takes some hours of my, maybe once a month, or I think it's probably more like once every 2 months, a couple hours, it's well worth the investment, not only for the business, to have me involved, but also for me to be involved in something that is of such high importance for the organization. So I think that's a perfect connection as to the nonprofit board that is for a nonprofit that is delivering critical services and that is also very important and viewed very importantly by the company's leadership.
Great. Thanks, Julio. And Carlos, when you were mentioning the fact that, in your case, you would tap on the shoulder and says, I want you to serve on the board. Like, why would Toyota say, I need for you as a representative of Toyota to join this board? Like, what's in it for Toyota in terms of your service to tap you on these boards?
Thank you. I will say that there are two different considerations that are informing that decision. One is that there is a level of differential investment. So, organizationally, there is a talent development process in which, progressively you get involved internally, and they expect you, as you move up within the organization, to go out and become proficient in influencing change and being able to go out and drive projects and be able to participate in committees that are helping define the culture of the organization. But it gets to a point in which they know that organizations know that the more that they expand the view of the leaders for them to understand macroeconomic factors, microeconomic factors, how a nonprofit organization operates, how a for-profit organization operates, what are the considerations that are informing communities and the industry, the more well-rounded you'll become as an employee, as an executive, and as a member of the community. So I think that there's a component that is tied to differential investment. The second consideration is more from a company perspective, they would like to identify the right talent with the right skill set to go ahead and basically serve as an extension of the corporate citizenship, right, in different missions and in different areas in which the organization is trying to get involved, participate, and influence outcomes. So we have a corporate mission. We have a diversity and inclusion mission as an organization. And consequently, we're trying to go and carry that mission through our community involvement, through our board participation as well. And consequently, they're asking us to go and basically be stewards of those guiding principles, those priorities that we're basically driving collectively as an organization as representatives of the board. So you ended up basically serving that dual purpose in which the organization is focusing on your professional development, but at the same time, you're basically serving as an extension of the corporate citizenship as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. So, one question, and I know that we're going to get to the questions that are coming in the chat, but but one that I think is I think our attendees will appreciate is one is that is the balance between the work that you do and the opportunity to serve on some of these nonprofit boards. My question is that, how many nonprofit boards should you serve on? But I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to modify the question that I saw from the audience as well. Is that if you're joining a non-for-profit that actually is aligned with your company, does that give you some extra flexibility to serve on these nonprofits versus if you are, just sort of a nonprofit on your own and you're you're doing it because it's you're committed to that nonprofit, but now you have to find your own time in order to serve that. So my question is that talk to me about the time commitments of serving on nonprofit boards, and is the alignment of some of your nonprofits give you some more flexibility to do that? So let me go with I'm going to go with Jackie first, and then I'll go with Carlos second, and Julio third.
Question in the chat that said, is board service something I should negotiate with considering a new role or position, and how much time do these board roles take? And I think, that is an important conversation to have with your manager, right? If you're not being assigned or recruited for a specific board seat from your business, I think that is something, if you're starting a new role or if you're changing your role, it's something you must talk about with your manager, because there is a significant time commitment for board service, because it's important to do board service right. And I think that this is something where, if you are upfront with your manager or your leadership that you want to serve on this board, that you want to sit in a corporate seat, so a seat that's designated to your company, but you're the representative on that board, then there usually is a pretty clear understanding that is time when you are serving as an ambassador or spokesperson from your business, and that is time that is the same as being at your desk with much more work to do, because you have to go back home and do all the other work that you missed when you weren't sitting at your desk. But I think that it's really, I think, up to the individual. Also, I serve on many boards. I probably sometimes think I serve on too many boards, but it's really, I think, about that relationship you have with your manager and how you are making time and making sure that you are fulfilling your responsibility to your job, to your primary professional responsibility, as well as to the boards that you're serving.
Thank you so much, Julio. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's important. So I'll tell you, I serve on a nonprofit board that I'm just doing just out of my own interest. And so in that one, I did not go to the company to ask for quote unquote permission or their endorsement, because I just thought this was just a personal passion and personal interest, et cetera. But if it's something that is, in my scenario, the boards that I serve in, it's been because there's some kind of connection to the organization, right? So for that one exception, but for that one exception, the other two boards that I serve on have some kind of connection to the organization, and it is easier to explain when you cannot make a meeting, for instance, a work meeting, because you have a conflict that for perhaps a board meeting or a critical meeting that is taking place at that nonprofit. It is much easier to explain that than to suddenly have to ask for an excuse for something that perhaps is not endorsed by the company. But still, I mean, I would say that even if it's not something, even if it's a nonprofit board that is not with a critical nonprofit partner for the organization, like in the scenario that it was this particular nonprofit that I volunteer sort of on the side. Generally, you can speak with your manager, and just express your passions and service. And so long as you're carrying your load, if you will, work-wise, I think people are generally fairly flexible, right? But again, it's a lot easier if you do it in a way that is strategic, and a way that it aligns not only your personal passions but also with the priorities for the business.
Great, thank you, Julio. Carlos, what are your thoughts? So, certainly, about that time commitment, but also almost a bit of what Julio mentioned about, he serves. There's some boards that he's on that serves on that's aligned with the company, but then he chose, of course, to do a board on his own, but recognizing that there's a difference in terms of how you show up at work when you do have to adjust your work calendar. For boards where there is alignment and boards that just meet your own personal passion but separate. What are your thoughts?
Look, the first thing very pragmatically that I have to acknowledge is that I have not seen anyone being promoted or being basically, rewarded organizationally if they're fantastic board members, but they're failing miserably in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, so you got to get your priorities straight, right? As an employee, you're expected to fulfill your responsibilities and drive, your projects forward, and basically make sure that what you're being tasked to do is being done in an exceptional manner. So that is your top priority. So how many is too many? I will say that is all based on your bandwidth and what the flexibility that your role allows us to basically achieve. In many instances, one will be plenty. In some instances, you may be able to go ahead and basically serve in 20 different boards because it's part of your core responsibility, or simply because the job and the responsibilities of your job basically gives you that level of flexibility. So you got to be able to, look at matters from that particular lens and make sure that you strike a good balance. Now, board representation has many layers of involvement, and believe me, many organizations will take all the time that you could afford to give because the needs are plenty. So I think that you definitely need to be strategic in how you get involved, communicate clearly to your manager internally, as well as with the board, as to what is your commitment in terms of time and involvement. And as long as that helps you strike a good balance to make sure that your brand is not diluted, your personal brand and the organizational brand, and what you do internally and what you do externally, I think that you're going to be extremely successful.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. So here's and I know this was a question that I think I saw from the audience, is that if someone wants to serve on a nonprofit board and they actually want to get a menu of nonprofits where there may be that alignment, are there resources internally? And this could be also a general question. You may be able to give examples at your own companies, but are there resources where if someone who's in the marketing department, or someone who's in the legal department, or someone this, and they want to get on a board, can say, where can I find these potential alignments? Like, is it in the Office of Community Affairs? Is it Diversity and Inclusion? Is it Government Affairs? Is it the foundation? Where would someone go if they want to kind of learn more about about some of these nonprofits. And again, while we certainly love our Latino nonprofits, we know that your company support lots of nonprofits, that are out there. But where would be some areas to go? So let me start with Julio.
I think it depends on the level of sophistication of your organization, right? So there isn't a single answer. So probably your CSR, your community affairs team is a good place to start. Your communications team may also be a good place to start. But if in lieu of that, just look at what your company is announcing. Look at what is being socialized via social media. That in itself can serve as a guide as to what are those causes and nonprofits that are critical or important to the business. Something that the organization views as important enough that they would issue some form of external communication or internal communication. So I think that, again, it's just going to depend as to the level of sophistication of the business. But if you wanted to go ahead and consult with somebody, I would probably start with a CSR or communications team.
Great, thank you, Julio. Carlos, what are what are your advice for anyone that is that is at their companies and they want to find some of these nonprofits and they want to see how they find ones that may align with their companies?
Yeah, I second fully what Julio mentioned in regards to the level of sophistication of the company. I mean, if it's a small business, it might be the person who is at the top that may be able to go ahead and give you that guidance. If it is a large corporation, there's always or often a community relations team, right, that basically have some of those answers. In many instances, if your manager is tenure and has been with the organization for more than a few years, they know how you can get involved. And I'll tell you, large organizations are often asking for volunteers, right? And they're always asking, for participation in activities that are taking place internally and externally. That gives you a sense, right, as to what is the level of involvement, as we reference, and how can you basically expand your participation in some of those activities. And the last frontier that I will probably reference is if you have a tremendous amount of passion for certain calling, and you notice that organizationally it aligns with the mission and vision and the values, but you have not seen or heard, right? Nothing prevents you from basically putting a one-pager together that speaks to have the organization ever considered doing X, Y, and Z. And I'll tell you, usually those communications triggered that email being sent to multiple people to make sure that that employee is well equipped with an answer. And the answer could be, oh, thank you for asking. It's great that you're basically pitching this to us. And oh, by the way, let me tell you everything that we're doing today that aligns with what you're proposing. Or it could be, what a great idea. It's not something that we're doing currently, and this is what we can do to mobilize. So you can always take the lead and basically present something tangible to the organization for the organization to react to. And that could be a great catalyst for you to learn a lot more about community involvement and participation in different type of activities and boards.
Great, thanks, Carlos. And Jackie, a similar question, but I want to slightly modify it because I know there's one question that came up here that sometimes some of our attendees feel that there's this perception that only very, very senior people get onto these very, very large nonprofit boards. But your companies support very local boards as well. I know, for example, you and I are very supportive of Congreso in Philadelphia, for example, and other very ones, of course, Dominican Women's Development Center that I support in New York City, very local, but very but doing great works in these areas. And so maybe Jackie, what advice would you give for those that are looking to find these boards, even if they are local boards that may still align with their companies? But what are your suggestions? I heard CSR, communications, other areas, but where would they go? What's your advice?
I would throw in a recommendation for government affairs as well. And that's how I've gotten involved in so many local organizations, is because, in politics, everything is local, right? All things come back to local community engagement. And so obviously the ERGs, and we talked about human resources now, I think is another kind of pipeline into board service, with all the companies having different DE&I and belonging initiatives. But I would say government affairs, because, once you're a business, you're participating in your chamber of commerce, and not only Hispanic chambers of commerce, but there are so many different local business organizations that need representatives and that need people to be engaged, because that is how business is being conducted. And I'll say one more thing is that, this is HACR, obviously, but the opportunity to be a person of color, to be a Hispanic executive, or to be a Hispanic employee that decides to serve on a non-Hispanic organization board is also extremely important and extremely powerful, because, I'm sure other panels here today have talked about the importance of having more Hispanics serve on boards, corporate boards. And that only happens when people have the experience and the practice of serving on nonprofit boards, whether they're state, regional, or national organizations. So I think there are so many different places where you can look. And I think, it's oftentimes just making that commitment of time and, committing to do it well. But I would also say government affairs, because that is another huge way how government affairs happens, by meeting people, building networks, working on coalitions and in coalitions through board service.
Great. I love that's a good way to kind of conclude this session, is just remind everybody that while we want to support our Latino organizations, we encourage you to serve on other nonprofits as well. I mean, I'll pull a little plug. Just last month, earlier this month, I joined the board of directors of Junior Achievement USA, and they do a lot of broad-based work. But again, it's it's a great way to serve on some of these boards. But some of these ones have local chapter boards. And earlier in my Wall Street career, I was at a company. They put out an email saying, "Who wants to go to the Nishimba Expo, which is now Prospanica today, or the National Black MBA Association, or going to these other things?" And then you agree, you volunteer, you get involved, and then before you know it, then the board stuff begins to happen. So just among these things, so when that volunteer opportunity happens, very much take advantage of it. So I know we're at time. So again, I really want to just thank our very, very, very esteemed VIP panelists. I mean, everyone. We have great panelists for all of LPP, but I want to just give a big thanks for Jackie Puente of Comcast NBC Universal, Carlos Becerra of Toyota North America, and Julio Suarez from Anheuser-Busch. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom and for really giving this great insight. And it's a great way to to conclude this. And of course, thank you to Toyota and Lowe's for sponsoring this session. So this concludes, of course, our sessions of our HACR Leadership Pipeline Program. And we really hope that every one of you had a great experience with our 2-day virtual experience. I want to make sure that everyone just says the date, because we are hopefully assuming everything is great, and of course we are expecting things to get back to normal as we emerge from this pandemic. Is to please save the date for October 24th to the 26th for our in-person HACR Leadership Pipeline Program, happening in Miami, Florida, at the beautiful JW Marriott Marquis. And we hope that everyone is able to attend. Please hold that date and save that date, and we'll get to have more sessions just like these, and of course do more interacting and more networking together as we continue to build that pipeline. We gave the name Leadership Pipeline Program for the very reason. Intentionality about how do we raise the pipeline for Latinos to rise up within their companies. So again, I want to thank all of you for participating. I want to also take a moment to thank all of our sponsors for their support. Thank you to our attendees. Thank you to our staff who worked tirelessly to make our HACR Leadership Pipeline Program a reality. And of course, a big thanks to our said board of directors for giving us the direction and guidance in terms because of what we do to advance Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. HACR has been at this for 35 years, and just know that we are with you. We stand with you. We want you to rise up together. And as you rise up, remember where we come from. Remember that the person behind you who is looking to you for leadership, mentorship, sponsorship, and together we can all move that needle in that positive direction to advance Hispanic inclusion. So with that, I want to welcome everyone to head to our final networking together. We're going to do one final networking, and then again, make sure that you're sharing your experience on social media, hashtag HACR LPP21, HACR LPP21. And with that, thank you all so much. And this concludes our sessions. And now on to our networking. Have a great night, everybody.